I'm Levi, 28 male, and my emotionally abusive stepmother is currently begging me to save her marriage to my father after she spent nearly 20 years trying to destroy my relationship with him. The irony is so thick I feel like I could choke on it. The request is not just audacious. It's a masterclass in the kind of reality-bending manipulation that has been the background radiation of my entire life. For 2 decades, I was a ghost in my own home, a footnote in my own family. Now, suddenly, I'm the main character in her drama, the one person she believes can pull her back from the brink. It would be funny if it weren't so deeply, profoundly exhausting. The first call wasn't from her. It was from my father, Robert. His tone was strangely flat, devoid of the usual forced cheerfulness he adopted whenever he had to discuss something related to our family life. It was the tone he used for business, for spreadsheets and tax audits. Levi, he said, his voice tinny through the speaker. I have something to tell you. Brenda and I are getting a divorce. I was standing in my small kitchen, staring at a half-finished design project on my laptop. The world seemed to narrow to the sound of his voice. Divorce. The word hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Not because I thought their marriage was a bastion of love and affection, far from it, but because I believed it was indestructible, forged in a shared pact of convenience and willful ignorance that had lasted for 18 years. Oh, I managed, my own voice sounding distant. Wow, Dad, are you okay? I will be, he said, still with that unnerving calm. It's for the best. There are financial reasons. It's complicated, but my decision is final. Financial reasons, that made a cold sort of sense. My father, a meticulous accountant, viewed the world through a lens of profit and loss, assets and liabilities. For him to detonate his life, the betrayal must have hit him in the one place he was most vulnerable, his ledger. After we hung up, I sank onto a kitchen stool, the news settling into my bones like a deep chill. A part of me, a small vindictive part I wasn't proud of, felt a surge of validation. For years, I had tried in my own quiet ways to show him what Brenda was like. I had tried to explain the constant low-level hum of her disapproval, the way she could turn a room cold with a single look, the way she methodically erased my presence. But he never saw it, or more accurately, he chose not to. To him, she was the vibrant, charming woman who had brought life back into the house after my mother passed away. To me, she was the one who made sure I knew that this new life had no real place for me in it. Brenda came into our lives when I was 10. My mother had been gone for 2 years, and the house was a quiet, gray place filled with my father's grief and my own confused sorrow. Then Brenda arrived, a whirlwind of bright colors, loud laughter, and floral perfume. At first, she was sickeningly sweet to me. She called me honey and sweetheart, bought me toys I didn't want, and ruffled my hair until my scalp was sore. I remember her telling my dad, he's just the most precious thing. We're going to be the best of friends. The facade didn't last long. It began to crack the moment the wedding rings were on their fingers. Her mission, I realized later, was to consolidate her position, to ensure that she and her son from a previous marriage, Josh, were the nucleus of this new family, and I was merely a satellite in a decaying orbit. Her primary strategy was isolation. She became the gatekeeper to my own father. It started with small things. I'd be in my room waiting for my dad to come home from work so I could show him a good grade on a test. Brenda would meet him at the door, her voice a low murmur, and by the time he got to me, he'd be tired and distracted. She'd have filled his head with her own day, her own needs, leaving no space for mine. I remember one incident with painful clarity. I was 12 and had won a regional art competition for my age group. It was the first time I felt truly proud of something I had created. The award ceremony was on a Friday evening. My dad had promised he'd be there. I waited on the school auditorium steps for an hour after it ended, clutching my certificate, until another kid's mom took pity on me and drove me home. When I walked in, Brenda was on the couch painting her nails. "Oh, there you are," she said, not looking up. "Your father got held up at work. He said he's sorry." I found out the truth a week later when I overheard my dad on the phone with his brother. "No, I completely forgot about Levi's art thing," he'd said, his voice laced with genuine regret. "Brenda never mentioned it. I feel terrible." She had never passed on the message. She had let me sit there feeling abandoned and then lied to my face. When I confronted her, my voice trembling with a boy's righteous anger, she'd manufactured tears with breathtaking speed. "I'm so overwhelmed, Levi," she'd cried to my father later that night. "I'm trying to manage this whole house and your son accuses me of being a liar. He's always been so difficult." My father, eager to keep the peace, comforted her and told me to apologize for upsetting her. And I did. I learned my lesson. My reality was secondary to her performance. As I grew older, her tactics evolved from simple gatekeeping to more sophisticated psychological games. She was a master of the backhanded compliment, the public put-down disguised as a joke. When I was 17, I'd poured my heart into a portfolio for a summer art program. At a family dinner with my grandparents, my father proudly mentioned it. Brenda had laughed, a tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, it's just so wonderful that Levi has his little hobby," she said to the table. "It's so brave to want to be an artist, even if it's not something a serious person can make a living with, but it keeps him busy." The table laughed along with her. My dad smiled, oblivious, but I saw the flicker of malice in her eyes. She knew how much it meant to me. She had seen the hours I'd spent sketching, painting, perfecting every piece. And in one sentence, she had reduced my passion to a childish pastime in front of the people whose opinions I valued most. I felt my face burn with a humiliation so hot it was almost physical. I wanted to be invisible. For the rest of the dinner, I was. The ultimate proof of my status in her new world order was her own son, Josh. He was 2 years younger than me, and from the moment he moved in, he was treated like a prince. The contrast was stark and brutal. My achievements were met with lukewarm acknowledgement, his were celebrated with fanfare. My high school graduation was a perfect example. I was a good student, graduating with honors. My celebration consisted of a card with a $50 bill in it and a quiet dinner at a mid-range chain restaurant. Brenda complained about the cost of my cap and gown. 2 years later, when Josh graduated, Brenda threw a massive backyard party. There was a caterer, a DJ, and a banner that read, "The world is yours, Josh." She and my dad gifted him a brand new laptop for college. Standing in the corner of my own backyard, watching her fuss over Josh, I felt like a stranger at someone else's party. My father, caught up in the celebration, didn't seem to notice the disparity. He just saw a happy, blended family, a testament to his successful second act. He couldn't see the cracks in the foundation because I was the only one who had fallen through them. My thoughts were a slideshow of these old wounds when my phone buzzed on the countertop, jolting me back to the present. The screen lit up with a name I had tried to delete from my life countless times, but which always seemed to reappear. Brenda. My thumb hovered over the ignore button. I knew why she was calling. The queen was about to be deposed and she was turning to the court jester for help. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. After all these years, she finally needed me. I let it ring, each buzz a small shock to my nervous system. It went to voicemail. I breathed a sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. A second later, it started ringing again. Her persistence was legendary. It was the same tenacity she used to hunt for perceived slights, the same energy she put into ensuring her will was always done. I knew she wouldn't stop. With a deep, fortifying breath, I answered, putting the phone on speaker and setting it on the counter. I didn't want it anywhere near my ear. "Levi," her voice was a choked, theatrical sob. "Oh, Levi, thank goodness you answered." I said nothing. Silence was a weapon I had learned from her, and it was surprisingly effective. People, especially people like Brenda, rushed to fill a void. "It's your father," she wailed, the performance already in full swing. "He's lost his mind. He's talking about divorce, about throwing our whole life away over a little bit of money. It's a misunderstanding, that's all, but he won't listen to me, he just won't listen." A little bit of money. My dad had sounded like his entire future was on fire. I leaned against the counter, picturing her. She'd be pacing, one hand gesturing wildly, the other clutching a tissue for dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes. "Levi, you have to talk to him," she pleaded, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He'll listen to you, you're his son, you can make him see sense, tell him he's overreacting. Tell him I'm sorry and we can fix this." The audacity was staggering. She was asking me to be her mouthpiece, her ambassador of reason, to the very man she had spent my entire adolescence trying to turn against me. My mind flashed back to another memory, one that still left a scar. I was 14, and my most prized possession was a framed photograph of my biological mother. She was laughing, her head throw. WN back, caught in a moment of pure joy at a picnic we'd had a year before she got sick. It was the only picture I had on my nightstand. One day, it was gone. I tore my room apart, I searched the whole house. It was nowhere. When I asked Brenda if she'd seen it, she gave me a look of pitying concern. "Oh, honey, I haven't seen it," she'd said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You know how you misplace things. Maybe you put it somewhere for safekeeping and forgot." I knew I hadn't. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my gut that she had taken it. We had argued the day before about my messy room, and this was her punishment. When my dad got home, I tried to explain, my voice cracking with frustration, but Brenda was ready. "Robert, he's accusing me of stealing," she'd said, her lower lip trembling. "I do everything for this family and he treats me like a common criminal. I think he just can't accept me." My father, exhausted and wanting a peaceful home, had sighed and taken her side. Levi, that's enough, he'd said sternly. Apologize to Brenda, it's just a picture, it will turn up. It never did, but the message was clear. Her feelings were fact and mine were an inconvenience. The photo was just an object, but losing it felt like a second, smaller death. It was an erasure of my past, clearing the way for her present. Her voice on the phone snapped me back. After everything I've done for you, she was saying, the tears now sounding more like angry huffs. I gave you a home, I treated you like my own son. That was the line, that was the one that made the cool, detached dam inside me break, treated me like her own son. The memory of college, so sharp and bitter, flooded my mind. I was a sophomore working 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet and I still came up short on rent. I called my dad, humiliated, and asked for a small loan. He immediately agreed. Of course, son, I'll transfer it tomorrow. The money never arrived. I called him a few days later and his tone was different, cool, and disappointed. Levi, Brenda, and I were talking, he'd said. We think it's important for you to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Bailing you out won't teach you responsibility. I was stunned into silence. I knew those weren't his words. They had Brenda's fingerprints all over them. Learn responsibility. It was her favorite condescending phrase. I later found out through a cousin that just 2 weeks prior, Brenda had paid for Josh and 3 of his friends to go on a lavish spring break trip to Mexico. My request for a few $100s to avoid eviction was a lesson in responsibility, while Josh's vacation was a well-deserved break. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I ended up having to sell my grandfather's old watch, the only other thing I had from my mom's side of the family, to pay my landlord. Levi, are you even listening to me? Brenda's voice was sharp now, the pleading replaced by irritation. This is important, this is about our family. Our family, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Right. Yes, our family, you might not care, but I love your father, and I'm not going to let him throw it all away. The sheer force of her self-delusion was almost impressive. She had constructed a reality in which she was the devoted wife and I was the ungrateful stepson, and she had lived in it for so long that she actually believed it. Something inside me, a cord of patience that had been stretched taut for 18 years, finally snapped. I wasn't angry, I was just done. Done with the games, done with the lies, done with her voice. I have to go, Brenda, I said, my own voice as flat as my father's had been. What? No, you don't, we're not finished. I pressed the red icon on my screen, cutting her off mid-squawk. The silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I had heard all day. I had hung up on Brenda. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt monumental. It was the first brick I had ever thrown back, and I knew with a weary certainty that the storm was just beginning. The silence lasted for approximately 90 seconds. Then my phone began to vibrate incessantly on the counter. A string of text messages, one after another, lit up the screen. It was like watching her train of thought derail in real time. The first texts were pleading. Levi, please call me back, this is a mistake. Your dad is just stressed, you know how he gets. He needs us to be strong for him. Then they shifted to guilt. I can't believe you would hang up on me when I'm in crisis. Your mother would be so disappointed in how you're behaving. Using my mother against me was a low blow, even for her. It was a tactic she reserved for moments of pure desperation. Finally, the messages took on the familiar, sharp edge of a threat. You think this won't affect you? If this family falls apart, it will be on your head too. Don't you dare do anything to make this worse. You have no idea what I'm going through. I watched the messages pile up, a digital monument to her panic. With a strange sense of detachment, I opened my contacts, found her name, and pressed block this caller. The vibrations stopped. For the first time, I had control over the off switch. But blocking her number didn't block the anxiety coiling in my stomach. Her words, especially the ones about my father, echoed in my head. He's just stressed. He needs us. She was already spinning the narrative, positioning herself as the calm, supportive wife and him as the irrational one. I needed to hear the full story from him without her manipulative filter. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Levi, is everything okay? He asked, his voice laced with concern. I'm fine, Dad, Brenda called me. A heavy sigh came through the phone. I was afraid of that. I told her not to involve you. I'm sorry, son. There it was again. An apology for the inconvenience, not for the source of it. For a moment, I considered letting it go, but the resolution that had been hardening inside me all afternoon wouldn't allow it. What exactly happened? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. You said it was financial. It is, he said, and the exhaustion in his voice was palpable. It's bad, Levi, really bad. I was preparing our tax documents for this year, going over the accounts, and I found some discrepancies. Things that didn't add up. He explained that he had dug deeper and discovered a world of secret debt. Brenda had taken out 3 high-interest credit cards in her name years ago and never told him. She had also taken out a personal loan against the equity in their house, forging his signature to do so. The spending was reckless: designer clothes, spa weekends, expensive gifts for Josh, lavish redecorating projects he thought were being paid for from their joint savings. She had been making the minimum payments, hiding the statements, and robbing Peter to pay Paul for years. "It's hundreds of thousands of dollars," he said, his voice cracking for the first time. "It's nearly all of our retirement savings gone, everything I worked for us for our future. She gambled it all away." Now I understood. This wasn't an emotional dispute, it was a detonation of his life's work. To my father, his financial stability was everything. It was the bedrock of his identity, the proof of his competence and hard work. Brenda hadn't just spent their money, she had attacked the very core of who he was. The forgery was the final, unforgivable betrayal. "I'm so sorry, Dad," I said, and I meant it. "She says she can fix it," he continued, his voice hardening with anger. "She doesn't get it. This isn't about the money anymore. It's the lies. For years, she's been lying to my face every single day. The trust is gone. There's nothing left to build on." I stayed silent, letting him process. I felt a strange and complicated mix of sympathy for him and a cold, hard anger. He was feeling betrayed after years of lies. Welcome to my world. "Look, I have to go," he said finally. "I have an appointment with my lawyer, just don't let her get to you." "I'm trying," I said, "but Dad, she was never easy." I threw the line out there, a small test. I wanted to see if this colossal betrayal had opened his eyes to anything else. His response was telling. "Well," he sighed, "you two never did see eye to eye, did you?" And there it was, he still saw it as a simple personality clash. A failure to see eye to eye, as if it were a minor disagreement over politics or movie genres and not a sustained 18-year campaign of emotional warfare. He still couldn't see that the woman who had lied to him about money was the same woman who had lied to him about me. Her character wasn't a recent development, it had just finally affected him directly. The frustration was so sharp it almost made me laugh. We said our goodbyes and I hung up, feeling more resolved than ever. My fight wasn't with him, not really. It was with her. It was about reclaiming the truth of my own experience, a truth that he had just proven he was still unable to see. I spent the next hour trying to distract myself with work, but my focus was shattered. I kept replaying conversations, seeing past events in the harsh new light of my father's discovery. Her whole life with us had been a performance, a carefully curated illusion of the perfect wife and mother. Just as I was finally getting into a design flow, a loud, insistent knock echoed from my apartment door. It wasn't the gentle rap of a delivery person or the polite tap of a neighbor. It was a frantic, demanding pounding that vibrated through the cheap wood. My blood ran cold. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I knew she had found me. My apartment, my one true sanctuary from her, had been breached. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I walked to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. The storm had arrived. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. There she was. Brenda's face was a mess of blotchy red skin and running mascara, a stark contrast to her usually immaculate makeup. Her expensive silk blouse was wrinkled, and her hair, normally coiffed into a perfect helmet, was disheveled. She looked like a woman coming apart at the seams. But beneath the convincing facade of a heartbroken wife, her eyes held the same familiar hard glint of battlefield determination. This wasn't a surrender, it was a flanking maneuver. "Levi," she gasped, pushing past me into my small entryway before I could react. "We need to talk." She surveyed my apartment with a quick, dismissive glance, as if its modest size and simple furnishings were a personal insult to her. This space was my pride and joy, the first place that was truly mine, every piece of furniture bought with my own hard-earned money. To her, it was just another sign of my failure to live up to the standards she had set with my father's checkbook. "Brenda, you can't be here," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "You need to leave." "I'm not leaving until you listen to me," she said, turning to face me. The tears started up again on command. "Your father is making the biggest mistake of his life, and you're the only one who can stop him. He's not thinking clearly. This debt, it was a misunderstanding. All of it was for us, for the family, to maintain our home, our life." She took a step closer, reaching for my arm. I flinched back instinctively, a reaction honed over years of avoiding her touch, which was always either a possessive grip or a condescending pat. Please, Levi, she whispered, her voice cracking beautifully. We're family. Whatever issues we've had in the past, we have to put them aside for your father's sake. He loves you. He'll listen to you. Just tell him that I'm sorry. Tell him we can get counseling, we can declare bankruptcy, we can do whatever it takes. Just don't let him do this. I stared at her, a strange calm settling over me. The chaos of her presence was crystallizing my thoughts. All the years of swallowed anger, of silent resentment, of feeling small and insignificant, coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. Why, I asked. My voice was quiet and the simple question threw her off balance. What do you mean, why? She sputtered. Because he's your father, because I'm your stepmother, because this is our family. Is it? I countered, still quiet. Are you my stepmother, Brenda, or are you just the woman who married my dad? She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. How can you say that? I raised you. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. No, you didn't. My father raised me. You just happened to be there. You were a warden, not a parent. That is a vicious, ungrateful thing to say, she shrieked, the tears vanishing as rage took their place. The mask was slipping. Is it? I said, taking a step forward, closing the distance between us. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to let her drag me down into a screaming match. I was going to use facts, my facts, the ones she had spent years trying to bury. Let me ask you something, Brenda. When you lost, the only photo I had of my mother on my nightstand was that raising me. Was that being family? Her face paled. I don't know what you're talking about. That was years ago. You were always so dramatic. I was 14, I said, my voice level. Or what about the time you told my father not to help me with my rent in college after I found out you'd just paid for Josh's entire spring break trip? Was that you treating me like your own son? I was trying to teach you to be responsible, she shot back, her voice high and defensive. Something Josh never had a problem with. And what about my high school graduation? I pressed on, the memories giving me strength. A $50 bill and a card. 2 years later, Josh gets a catered party and a brand new computer. What lesson was that teaching me, Brenda? That my achievements were worth less than his, that I was worth less. You are twisting everything, she seethed, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You were always a difficult, sensitive child. I had to walk on eggshells around you. You resented me from day one. I resented you because you made it clear from day one that I was an obstacle, I said, my voice finally rising, not with rage, but with the sheer weight of 2 decades of suppressed truth. You didn't want a son, you wanted a dependent. You wanted my dad's undivided attention and his wallet, and I was in the way. You didn't build a family, you executed a hostile takeover. The air crackled with the things unsaid for 18 years. Her face was a mask of fury. The victim act was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating woman I knew so well. So you're asking me, I continued, bringing it back to the present, to go to my father and lie for you. You want me to help you piece back together the life you shattered with your own greed and deceit. You want my help to continue manipulating the man you systematically tried to alienate me from. I took a final breath, ready to deliver the words that had been forming in my soul for my entire adult life. You gave me nothing but trauma, Brenda. You spent nearly 20 years making sure I knew my place, that I was an outsider in my own home. You don't get to ask for my loyalty now that your con is falling apart. Loyalty is earned. You gave me nothing, so you get nothing. You deserve no loyalty from me after everything you did. For a moment, she was utterly speechless. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The truth of my words, delivered without hysteria, had finally penetrated her thick armor of self-delusion. Then the true Brenda emerged, venomous and raw. You selfish, selfish little brat, she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. After everything I did for you, after I put a roof over your head. No, I cut her off, my voice like ice. My father put a roof over my head, you just lived in it, now get out of my apartment. She stared at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost stunning. She looked around my home one last time, as if trying to memorize every detail to use as ammunition later. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door so hard that a small picture frame on my wall rattled. The silence she left behind was deafening. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, my body trembling with the massive adrenaline dump. It was over, I had said it. I had said it all. And in the ringing silence of my apartment, I felt the first terrifying, exhilarating flutter of freedom. The adrenaline ebbed away slowly, leaving me feeling shaky and hollowed out like a building after an earthquake. I sank onto my sofa, my legs suddenly weak. The confrontation had taken everything out of me, but in its place, something new was settling in. It was a profound sense of lightness. A weight I hadn't even been fully conscious of carrying, a burden of unspoken truths and swallowed pain, had been lifted. I had stood up to her. I hadn't just defended myself. I had spoken for the 10-year-old boy who missed his mom, the 12-year-old who waited on the school steps, the 17-year-old who was humiliated at the dinner table. I had honored their pain, and in doing so, I had finally, truly let it go. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze. I tried to work, but I just stared at the screen. I made coffee I didn't drink. I wandered around my apartment, touching my own things, the books on my shelves, the canvases leaning against the wall, the worn-out armchair in the corner. This was my life, the life I had painstakingly built for myself, not in spite of her, but separate from her. I had created my own world, a place where her influence couldn't reach, and she had breached it. But she hadn't broken it, I had cast her out. As evening approached, my phone rang. It was my dad, my stomach clenched. I knew this was coming. "Levi," he said, and his voice was tight with a familiar tension. "Brenda just called me." "I figured she would," I said, bracing myself. "She's hysterical. She said you attacked her, that you were cruel and vicious and threw her out of your apartment. She said you dredged up all sorts of nonsense from the past to hurt her." He paused. "What happened?" In the past, this would have been my cue to get defensive, to argue my case against her carefully crafted fiction. I would have been desperate for him to believe me, to see my side. But this time was different. The confrontation had changed me. I was no longer a child pleading for his father's validation. "Dad," I said, my voice weary but calm, "I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to have a three-way conversation where you're the referee between me and her. I'm not going to defend myself against her lies, not again." He was silent on the other end. I could practically hear him trying to process this new version of me. "If you want to know what happened," I continued, "if you really, truly want to hear my side of things, then you can come over. Just you, we can talk face to face. But I am done trying to shout over her version of the truth." It was an ultimatum, but a quiet one. It wasn't about forcing his hand, it was about setting a boundary. My relationship with him, whatever it was going to be, had to exist outside of her shadow. He could continue to live in the fiction she created, or he could step into my reality. The choice was his. There was a long pause on the line, so long I thought he might have hung up. I could picture him rubbing his forehead, caught between the woman he had spent 18 years with and the son he had barely known. "Okay," he said finally, his voice subdued. "Okay, Levi, I'll come over. How about tomorrow evening?" Relief washed over M's. So potent it almost buckled my knees. He had agreed. He had chosen to listen. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. It was the first step onto a bridge that I wasn't even sure was still standing. "Tomorrow evening is good," I said. "I'll see you then." We hung up and I looked around my quiet apartment. The scene of the battle was now calm. I felt a sense of trepidation about the conversation to come, but it was overshadowed by a flicker of hope. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I might actually get my father back. The next evening, my father arrived at my door right on time, a habit from his decades as an accountant. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slumped with a weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. He held a pizza box in one hand, an awkward peace offering. "I wasn't sure if you'd eaten," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Thanks, Dad, come on in," I said, stepping aside. The first few minutes were painfully awkward. We sat at my small dining table, the pizza box open between us like a buffer zone. We made small talk about my work, about the weather, about a new building going up downtown. It was the safe, superficial script we had followed for years. But tonight it felt flimsy, like a thin sheet of ice over a deep, dark lake. Finally, I pushed my plate away. "Dad," I started, and he looked up, his expression guarded. "I'm not going to rehash what happened with Brenda yesterday. It is what it is." She said her piece, I said mine. He nodded slowly, waiting. "I want to talk about before that," I said. "I want to tell you what it was like for me, not to accuse you, but just so you know." This was the moment. This was my one chance to make him understand, to show him the past through my eyes. I didn't start with anger. I started when I was 10. I told him how lonely the house was after Mom died, and how, at first, Brenda felt like a splash of bright, warm color in a gray world. Then I told him how the colors started to fade. I spoke about the gatekeeping, the way my access to him became conditional, filtered through her. I described the feeling of waiting for him to come home, only to have her intercept him at the door, her voice a low murmur that seemed to suck all the air out of the room, leaving none for me. I spoke about the award ceremony. I wasn't mad that you missed it because of work, Dad. I was heartbroken because you never even knew about it. I sat on those steps feeling like I was invisible, like my accomplishments didn't even register in my own home. I talked about the cute hobby comment at the dinner table. You all laughed, I said, my voice quiet. I know you didn't mean anything by it, but she did. It was a power play. It was her way of telling me and everyone else that my dreams were small and silly. I felt so humiliated and I felt so alone because the one person I wanted to be proud of me was laughing along with her. I laid it all out piece by painful piece. The favoritism towards Josh, the lost photograph of my mom, the sabotaged loan in college. I didn't use an accusatory tone. I used I felt statements just as I had learned in the few therapy sessions I could afford a few years back. I felt like I had to compete for your attention. I felt like my grief for mom was an inconvenience to her. I felt like I was constantly being judged and found wanting. My father sat there listening. For the first time I could remember, he wasn't interrupting, he wasn't defending her, he wasn't making excuses, he was just listening. The financial betrayal had done more than just ruin him, it had shattered the lens through which he viewed his wife. He was finally seeing the same woman I had been seeing for 18 years. The cracks in the foundation had become chasms he could no longer ignore. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy. I had said everything. I had laid my entire childhood at his feet, and I had no idea what he would do with it. He stared down at his hands resting on the table. He took a shaky breath. When he looked up at me, his eyes were shining with tears. Levi, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I had no idea. I tried to tell you, I whispered. I know, he said, and a tear traced a path through the lines on his cheek. I know you did, I just didn't listen, I didn't want to see it. He shook his head, a look of profound self-recrimination on his face. After your mother was gone, I was so lost. The house was so empty. And Brenda, she was so full of life. She made me feel alive again. I was so focused on my own happiness, on putting my own life back together, that I didn't see what it was doing to you. He reached across the table, his hand trembling slightly, and placed it on my arm. A father is supposed to protect his son, he said, his voice breaking. That's his number one job, and I failed. I let her build a wall between us. Indeed, I didn't even notice until it was a mile high. I let you face all of that alone. And for that, son, I am so sorry. The words I had waited my entire life to hear. It wasn't a magic wand. It didn't erase the years of pain or loneliness, but it was a start. It was the acknowledgement, the validation that I had craved for so long. The apology wasn't for her actions, it was for his inaction. And that was what mattered. I felt the tightness in my own chest release and my own eyes welled up. We sat there for a long time, two grown men crying over a cold pizza, finally having the most honest and important conversation of our lives. We talked for hours, long into the night. It was the beginning of rebuilding the bridge, one painful, honest plank at a time. The months that followed were a period of quiet reconstruction. The divorce proceeded, a messy and complicated affair on paper, but a clean break in our lives. Brenda fought, of course, trying every legal and emotional maneuver she could think of, but the financial evidence was irrefutable. My father was resolute. He had lost his savings, but he had regained his clarity. True to his word, he sold the large family house, the place that held so many ghosts for me. It was too big for him now and too full of the life he was leaving behind. He moved into a smaller, more manageable condo closer to the city. The sale of the house helped him recoup some of his financial losses, but more than that, it was a symbolic cleansing. Our own relationship began to heal slowly and carefully. We started having dinner once a week. At first, the conversations were stilted as we navigated the new terrain of our honesty, but gradually it became easier. He started asking about my work not just as a polite courtesy but with genuine interest. He'd look at my latest designs, ask about my clients, and truly listen to my answers. One evening, he told me he was proud of the life I had built for myself. You did it all on your own, Levi, he said, his voice full of a quiet respect I had never heard before. Despite everything, you became a good man. Those simple words meant more to me than any grand gesture ever could. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, he came over for our weekly dinner. He was carrying a small, dusty cardboard box. I found this when I was cleaning out the last of the stuff from the old house, he said, placing it on the table. It was in the back of Brenda's closet, tucked away under some old blankets. My heart gave a lurch. I opened the box. Inside, nestled among some of my old childhood drawings that had mysteriously gone missing, was a familiar silver frame. I lifted it out. It was the photograph of my mother, her laughing face looking up at me. Beneath it were a few other small treasures I had thought lost forever, a medal I'd won in a middle school track meet, a collection of keychains I'd treasured, and my grandfather's watch, the one I thought I'd sold. I stared at it, confused. I guess you didn't have to sell it after all, my dad said softly. I paid your rent that month. I told Brenda I was going to, no matter what she said. She must have lied, told you the money never came through, and I never thought to follow up with you directly. We looked at the contents of the box, the silent, damning evidence of her petty cruelties and calculated manipulations. It was the final chapter, the undeniable proof of the secret war she had waged against a child. We didn't need to say anything. We both just understood. He closed the box, and with it, we closed the door on that part of our lives for good. I don't feel vengeful or triumphant when I think about Brenda. Mostly, I just feel a quiet sense of peace. I realize now that confronting her wasn't about getting revenge. It was about reclaiming my own story. It was about standing up for the boy who was taught to be silent and telling his truth out loud. In refusing to save her marriage, I saved myself. In refusing to give her the loyalty she never earned, I finally gave it to myself. So for anyone out there reading this, for anyone who has ever been made to feel small or invisible by someone who was supposed to care for them, know this: your feelings are valid. Your reality is real even if no one else sees it. And loyalty, true loyalty, is a two-way street. It is earned through respect, kindness, and trust. It is not an obligation, and it is not a debt. You have every right to protect your own peace, to draw your own boundaries, and to walk away from the people who cause you harm, no matter what title they hold in your family. Your first and most important loyalty is to the person you are and the person you are trying to become.